Yes, essentially it's Germany, Austria, a little bit of Hungary. You know, that's Hollywood. That's where Hollywood comes from. It's Vienna. You know?
Ich glaube, es gibt keinen wirklichen Bereich im Hollywood-Kino, der nicht in irgendeiner Weise von österreichischen oder im weiteren Sinne auch altösterreichischen, war ja auch Ungarn und so weiter, Emigranten mitgeprägt worden ist und bestimmt worden ist.
The incredible thing to me is that Steiner was starting with nothing. He was starting with a blank slate, a new art form that didn't exist. And he had to pull from music and said, well, I'll start here. And he created a language of a narrative, and the narrative meaning the music is telling the story.
It's possible that Steiner would have known of Korngold the Wunderkind, but I don't think socially they had ever met. But in Hollywood, being emigres together, they quickly became friends. And also, to a certain extent, rivals, because, of course, the Plum films at Warner Brothers were given either to Korngold or to Steiner.
But I think it was Steiner who really brought to wide prominence the whole notion of the impact of music and image together.
They saw that their whole investment would be lost, and they decided to trust it to Max. And his music put people in a sort of an emotional vice. They couldn't get out of it. And it made the picture a tremendous hit. And it made stars out of everybody who was in that film.
I mean, all the same. It just takes your heart there. And when it's played by 30 violins, I mean, how can you not get moved at them? It's such an emotional theme. People look down their noses at melody. In concert music too, if you write a melody, you're dead. But to write a great melody is really hard. It's really hard. And these guys are really good at it. And they could write not only great melodies, they could write very great melodies for very specific situations. Like that's for Gone for the Wind.
So it's not as though Steiner was an island, but everybody was evolving in their particular way. But Steiner, I think, led the parade with regard to music throughout the film versus, just in certain special instances in addition to the main title and the closing title.
Max Steiner, first of all, met a significant amount of resistance to an orchestral score. Now, yes, there had always been music in or accompanying film. So now sound was with us, sound was on the screen. And this represented a significant increase in sophistication to filmmakers and to studios who thought at the time that music, especially orchestral music, not source music, not where you saw a band in the background or a piano player, but that orchestral music would be noticed and would seem to be artificial.
Korngold began doing these action films in the next decade, Captain Blood and Seawolf and the Adventures of Robin Hood. And now he took it another huge step because he was taking the inspiration of what Steiner had done, but he was turning it into a very precise narrative art form. And that laid out the foundation of what, when you have an adventure movie, if you have an action movie, and you're using an orchestra, I think we still constantly refer back to the template laid out by these composers.
Henry Fonda, who is the leading man in the film, is out in the garden of this big plantation, and it's known that, you know, the yellow fever is further down in the bayou, and they've all come down to the plantation to escape it. And he's out in the garden at night, and he suddenly goes like this, because a mosquito has bitten him. And just as he does that, there's a plonk in the orchestra. And that is an example of Mickey Mousing that Max liked to do, so that the audience knew, even if nobody else says anything on screen, that was an important moment.
A kiss is just a kiss. And then the clicks come back in for that. Those are all sync points. They're either bar lines or different sync points for one.
There's to be no trouble about them. Good. Hello? Hello?
Anyway, I mean, that's kind of how this is all organized, that we're able to synchronize. What we just saw there, you can see in the music that there is a corollary to all the lines, the streamers that we're going across. So I when they're on the bar, they're traditionally in green, and then these purple ones are where the tempo changes. So you have a streamer on the bar line and then a streamer on the second beat, so that you kind of know that it's slower or faster, or, you know, whatever. And then when I have these blue ones, when the clicks go out, because they sort of go in and out depending on kind of what you're doing.
Korngold never used things like that. He never used a click track, which is like a repeated metronomic beat in the headphones. He didn't use punches on the screen to indicate where the music started and where the music stopped, because he just used his own innate sense of timing. Steiner needed these aids.
Korngold listened to Wagner, and I listened to a lot of Korngold. Steiner listened to Wagner, and I listened to a lot of Steiner. Franz Waxman listened to Wagner, and I've listened to a lot of Franz Waxman. And so I have a lot of classical influence filtered through film composers.
I think that Korngold, Waxman, Roja, Herman formed a nucleus of, Roja being from Budapest, a nucleus of composers who had whose musical horizons were beyond the film industry.
I think it's true that Max Steiner was the first composer to utilize the leitmotif technique. I think it felt natural. You know, in the early 1930s, no one really knew how effective music would be in film. So Steiner experimented, and I think by assigning themes to characters and creating music appropriate to certain situations felt natural to him, coming right out of the Wagner school, really.
Well, King Kong was certainly a breakthrough because it used the Wagnerian leitmotif, which is not the first time that was done, but this was on a big scale. And of course, there was more music during that picture, with the exception. And it was done in a symphonic manner, but done in an unusual manner because you're dealing with the bizarre and the fantasy. So it wasn't just, you know, beautiful music or just a lot of dissonance. It was a little bit of everything, because you had the tender, you know, you had the Fay Wray theme, you had the love theme, and the Beauty and the Beast, and you had all of these elements working, but in that Wagnerian mode, you know, the leitmotif. So it was a breakthrough in many ways, and of course it was probably the most, at that time, the most, let's say, advanced score in terms of what music would bring to the film. And of course it was noticed, you know.
dadurch, dass ein großer Teil oder ein wesentlicher Teil der damalig existierenden österreichischen Filmindustrie und des Filmschaffens sozusagen jüdisch geprägt war, es sehr viele Leute gab, aber auch Leute, die einfach den Nazis kritisch gegenüberstanden, hat das bedeutet im Wesentlichen, dass eigentlich das, was die österreichische Filmwirtschaft war, zu dem Zeitpunkt zerschlagen worden ist durch die Nazis und ersetzt dann durch eine reine Propagandamaschinerie.
And because it was dubbed into German, they were not using the scores by Steiner and Korngold. They were using stock music available to them here in Austria. And so most Austrians will see these old movies on television in German dubbed versions without the music that was written for them. So why should they value it?